If you had walked into Blackwood Technologies that Monday morning, you would have thought you were witnessing another ordinary day inside one of America's fastest-growing companies. Employees hurried across the polished marble lobby with coffee in one hand and laptops in the other. Investors were expected later that afternoon, and every minute carried a price tag measured in thousands of dollars. Then everything stopped. The silence arrived so suddenly that people instinctively turned toward the front entrance. Standing there was Ethan Blackwood, the company's celebrated CEO, a man admired on magazine covers for his confidence and feared inside his own headquarters for his temper. His tailored suit looked flawless, his polished shoes echoed across the floor, and every employee immediately understood that someone was about to have a very bad day. His eyes locked onto an elderly homeless man quietly sitting near the reception desk. The old man wasn't shouting. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't disturbing anyone. He simply sat there with an old leather notebook resting on his lap, patiently waiting as if he belonged there. Yet to Ethan, appearances were enough. Without asking a single question or giving the elderly stranger a chance to explain himself, he raised his voice for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Throw him out. He doesn't belong in my building." The order echoed through the room with such force that conversations stopped mid-sentence. Security guards exchanged uneasy glances before reluctantly stepping forward. Receptionists lowered their eyes. Several employees looked uncomfortable, but no one dared challenge the CEO. They all knew Ethan Blackwood had built his reputation by demanding absolute obedience. The old man slowly stood to his feet. There was no anger in his face, no panic, no embarrassment. He adjusted his worn jacket, picked up his notebook, and looked directly into Ethan's eyes with a calm expression that somehow made the room even quieter. Then he spoke just one sentence. "I hope you're just as confident tomorrow." Those words hung in the air long after he turned and walked toward the exit. Ethan smirked, shook his head, and laughed as though the encounter meant nothing. Employees nervously returned to work, convinced the strange interruption was already over. They couldn't have been more mistaken. Less than 24 hours later, an emergency board meeting would be called without warning. Directors would arrive from across the country. Attorneys would quietly enter the building carrying confidential files. Phones would begin ringing nonstop. And the very same homeless man who had been removed by security would walk back through those same glass doors. Only this time, no one would stop him. Every executive in the room would stand as he entered. Every board member would greet him with respect. Because the man everyone believed was homeless wasn't a stranger looking for help. He was the company's majority investor. The question that stunned everyone wasn't simply how this happened. It was far more unsettling. How could the most powerful man inside a billion-dollar corporation fail to recognize the one individual who ultimately held the future of that company in his hands? Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What happened inside Blackwood Technologies shares striking similarities with real cases that have surfaced over the years involving wealthy business owners, anonymous investors, and social experiments carried out by executives who intentionally concealed their identities to observe how people behaved when they believed no reward was waiting for kindness. While the names and specific events in this story have been changed to protect privacy and present the narrative in documentary form, the themes you're about to witness are deeply rooted in real human behavior, corporate culture, and the dangers of judging people solely by what they wear. As incredible as Ethan Blackwood's decision may seem, history has repeatedly shown that some of the greatest business failures have begun with one simple assumption: that appearance always reveals value. In this case, that assumption would trigger the biggest mistake of Ethan Blackwood's entire career, and before the next sunset, everything he believed he controlled would begin slipping away one decision at a time. The question that echoed through Blackwood Technologies wasn't just how an elderly homeless man had walked into one of the most secure corporate headquarters in the city. The real question was why he had come there in the first place. People who witnessed the confrontation would later remember different details. Some recalled the calm expression on the old man's face. Others remembered the unusual confidence in his voice when he spoke those final words to Ethan Blackwood. A few employees even admitted they felt sorry for him, believing they had just watched another struggling man humiliated simply because he looked different from everyone else in the building. Yet none of them could explain why the stranger never begged, never argued, and never showed the slightest sign of fear. It was almost as though he expected everything to unfold exactly as it did. That single detail would become impossible to ignore once the truth finally surfaced. As investigators inside the company would later discover, every decision made during those few minutes in the lobby had quietly set a chain of events into motion that no executive could stop. To understand why that brief encounter mattered so much, we first need to understand the two men standing on opposite sides of that lobby. On one side was Ethan Blackwood, a chief executive celebrated by financial magazines as the face of modern American business. Investors admired his aggressive leadership. Television hosts praised his confidence. Shareholders loved the impressive profits that seemed to grow quarter after quarter. But inside the walls of Blackwood Technologies, the image looked very different. Employees often described Ethan as brilliant but impossible to approach. He demanded perfection, rewarded results, and had little patience for excuses. Staff members knew better than to question him in meetings. Managers rehearsed presentations for days because a single mistake could cost someone their job. New hires quickly learned an unwritten rule that shaped the culture of the entire company. Appearances mattered almost as much as performance. Ethan believed successful people should always look successful. He once told a room full of executives that the way a person dressed revealed everything worth knowing about them. Many nodded in agreement. Others remained silent, unsure whether they truly believed those words or simply feared disagreeing with the man who signed their paychecks. Standing across from him that morning was a man no one recognized. The receptionist would later tell colleagues she noticed him nearly 30 minutes before Ethan arrived. He entered quietly, greeted everyone with remarkable politeness, and asked if he could speak with the CEO for just a few minutes. He never demanded an appointment. He never claimed to be important. When informed that meetings were by invitation only, he simply thanked her and took a seat in the reception area. He spent most of the time writing inside an old leather notebook that looked decades old. Every so often, he glanced toward the elevators before returning to his notes. One employee passing through the lobby even offered to buy him breakfast, assuming he had wandered in to escape the cold. The elderly man smiled warmly, declined the offer with genuine appreciation, and said he was exactly where he needed to be. At the time, those words sounded confusing. Later, they would sound almost prophetic. Security footage reviewed afterward revealed something else that few people noticed in the moment. Although several visitors entered and exited the building during those 30 minutes, the elderly man never once appeared distracted. He carefully observed the employees, the conversations, and even the interactions between managers and reception staff. His eyes seemed less interested in the expensive artwork decorating the lobby than in the people walking past him. It was as though he wasn't visiting the company to admire its success, but to measure something far more valuable than quarterly profits. And then Ethan Blackwood arrived. In less than 60 seconds, without asking a single meaningful question, he reached a conclusion that would define everything that followed. It wasn't based on facts. It wasn't based on evidence. It was based entirely on what he believed he saw. The expensive suit facing the worn jacket. The polished shoes confronting weathered boots. The wealthy executive judging the elderly stranger before learning his name. What Ethan didn't know was that this encounter had never been about gaining access to his office. The old man wasn't hoping for a donation, a favor, or even a conversation. He had come seeking something much more revealing. Sometimes the fastest way to understand a person's character isn't to listen to their speeches or study their business achievements. Sometimes all you have to do is place someone unexpected in their path and watch the choice they make when they believe no one important is watching. Ethan Blackwood believed the incident was over the moment the lobby doors closed behind the elderly stranger. In reality, the most important chapter of the story had only just begun, and somewhere across the city, a single phone call was about to transform one ordinary Monday into the beginning of the biggest corporate shock Blackwood Technologies had ever experienced. The elderly man walked away from Blackwood Technologies without looking back. His pace never changed, and neither did the calm expression on his face. A few employees standing near the entrance watched until he disappeared into the afternoon crowd, wondering why someone who had just been publicly humiliated seemed completely unaffected. Ethan Blackwood, on the other hand, had already moved on. Within minutes, he was in another executive meeting discussing quarterly earnings, upcoming acquisitions, and plans to expand the company's influence into new markets. To him, the incident in the lobby was so insignificant that he barely remembered it by lunchtime. After all, people came and went every day. Security removed unwanted visitors all the time. As far as Ethan was concerned, he had simply protected the image of his company. Yet several floors below, whispers had already begun spreading among employees. Some questioned whether the elderly man truly deserved to be treated that way. Others couldn't stop thinking about the unusual confidence in his final words. "I hope you're just as confident tomorrow." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It sounded more like someone stating a fact that had already been decided. The old man eventually reached a quiet city park several blocks away and settled onto a weathered wooden bench beneath a large oak tree. He carefully opened the same leather notebook he had carried into the company and reviewed several handwritten pages filled with dates, figures, observations, and names. After a few moments, he reached into his coat pocket and removed a small mobile phone. There was no hesitation before making the call. When the person on the other end answered, he spoke in the same calm tone he had used inside the lobby. "I've seen everything I needed to see," he said. "Please let the board know it's time." There were no lengthy explanations and no emotional speeches. The conversation lasted less than a minute before the phone disappeared back into his pocket. Nearby, children laughed as they chased pigeons across the park, completely unaware that a decision affecting thousands of employees had just been set into motion with a single conversation. Inside Blackwood Technologies, the afternoon continued like any other. Executives congratulated themselves on another profitable quarter, while Ethan confidently outlined ambitious plans for the future. He spoke about leadership, discipline, and maintaining the company's reputation, never realizing that events beyond his office walls were already moving faster than he could imagine. Across the country, confidential emails began arriving in the inboxes of board members marked urgent. Attorneys canceled appointments and prepared legal documents. Financial advisors reviewed ownership agreements that had remained untouched for years. One by one, directors confirmed their attendance for an emergency meeting scheduled early the following morning. Curiously, the meeting request contained no explanation, only a brief message stating that every voting member was expected to attend in person. Even those who rarely traveled immediately rearranged their schedules. Something extraordinary was happening, and the small circle of people who understood the reason guarded the information with complete silence. Meanwhile, Ethan ended his day exactly as he always did. He left the office convinced he was in complete control of his company and his future. He had no reason to believe otherwise. The financial reports looked excellent. Investors appeared satisfied. The media continued praising his leadership. Yet while he enjoyed dinner that evening, another set of documents was quietly making its way across polished conference tables inside private law offices. Hidden within those pages were agreements signed years earlier, agreements that very few people inside Blackwood Technologies had ever seen. They contained authority powerful enough to reshape the company's leadership overnight. By sunrise, Ethan Blackwood would discover that success built over decades could begin slipping away in a matter of minutes, all because he judged one stranger before taking the time to learn who he really was. Before we reveal what happened when the board members gathered the next morning and why every executive in the room stood the moment the elderly man entered, take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. If you had been standing in that lobby, would you have questioned Ethan's decision, or would you have remained silent like everyone else? We genuinely love to hear your perspective because stories like this remind us that one decision, one assumption, or one moment of kindness can change everything. And if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful story. Trust us, what happens inside that boardroom next is something Ethan Blackwood could never have imagined, and you won't want to miss a single moment. As the first rays of sunlight reflected against the towering glass walls of Blackwood Technologies the following morning, no one outside the executive floor had any idea they were about to witness one of the most remarkable leadership changes in the company's history. Employees noticed unfamiliar luxury cars pulling into the underground garage. Members of the board arrived unusually early. Attorneys carrying thick, confidential folders walked through the hallways without speaking to anyone. The atmosphere felt different. Conversations were quieter. Smiles were fewer. Even the executive assistants sensed that something important was about to happen. Ethan Blackwood entered the building with the same confidence he carried every morning. He greeted no one, walked directly to the executive elevator, and assumed the emergency board meeting had something to do with a new acquisition or perhaps another investment opportunity. Losing his position never crossed his mind. Why would it? He believed he had built the company into a financial powerhouse, and every major decision had reinforced his belief that success belonged to those willing to make difficult choices. The encounter with the elderly homeless man had already faded from his memory. When Ethan entered the boardroom, every director was already seated. The room felt unusually tense. Thick folders rested neatly in front of each board member, yet no one opened them. Several avoided eye contact altogether. Before Ethan could ask why everyone looked so serious, the chairman calmly stood and announced that an extraordinary shareholder meeting had been called under provisions written into the company's original investment agreement many years earlier. Ethan frowned in confusion. He had reviewed those documents countless times during his career, yet there were sections negotiated before he became CEO that he had never expected would matter. The chairman continued by explaining that the company's largest private investor had exercised a long-standing right to review executive leadership after concerns were raised about the direction of the organization's values and corporate culture. Ethan immediately began thinking through a list of wealthy investors, trying to determine which one had requested such an unusual meeting. None of the names that came to mind prepared him for what happened next. The conference room doors slowly opened, and every board member immediately rose to their feet. Ethan remained seated, staring toward the entrance with growing curiosity. Walking into the room with calm confidence was the same elderly man security had escorted from the lobby less than 24 hours earlier. Only this time, he wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, polished shoes, and carried the same weathered leather notebook under his arm. The difference wasn't the clothing. The difference was the respect everyone in the room showed him. Directors stepped forward to shake his hand. Senior attorneys greeted him by name. Even the chairman smiled warmly before inviting him to the head of the table. Ethan's face drained of color as realization slowly replaced confusion. The man he had dismissed as worthless wasn't standing there to ask for forgiveness. He wasn't there to seek revenge either. He was there because he had every legal right to lead the meeting. The elderly man finally introduced himself. "My name is Samuel Brooks." His voice remained as calm as it had been the day before. He explained that decades earlier he had quietly built one of the country's most respected private investment firms before choosing to step away from public life after the loss of his wife. Instead of chasing recognition, he dedicated himself to supporting businesses whose leaders claimed they valued integrity, compassion, and respect. Blackwood Technologies had been one of those companies. Samuel had become its largest investor long before Ethan ever occupied the CEO's office. While other investors focused almost exclusively on financial returns, Samuel believed lasting success depended on something far more difficult to measure: character. Over the years, he had watched the company's profits increase while employee complaints quietly grew. Anonymous surveys described a culture driven by fear rather than respect. Staff turnover continued climbing. Talented people left not because they disliked the work, but because they no longer believed leadership cared about the people producing the results. Samuel didn't rely on reports alone. He wanted to witness the company's culture with his own eyes. That was why he entered the lobby dressed as an ordinary homeless man. He wasn't testing security. He was testing leadership. Silence filled the room as Samuel opened his notebook and began reading observations recorded during previous anonymous visits to the company. He spoke about employees who treated maintenance workers with kindness, receptionists who remained respectful under pressure, junior staff members who quietly helped strangers without expecting recognition. Then he described Ethan's actions from the previous morning. He explained that the CEO never asked a single question before passing judgment. He never wondered whether the elderly visitor had an appointment, needed assistance, or deserved simple human dignity. Samuel looked directly at Ethan before repeating the same words he had spoken in the lobby. "I hope you're just as confident tomorrow." This time, everyone in the room understood exactly what he meant. The chairman then presented the board's recommendation. It wasn't based solely on one encounter. Months of internal reviews, employee interviews, leadership assessments, and shareholder concerns had already painted a troubling picture. The incident in the lobby simply confirmed everything the board feared. When the vote was called, the outcome was unanimous. Ethan Blackwood was removed as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. The man who believed appearances defined a person's worth walked into the meeting expecting another successful day and left carrying a cardboard box containing the personal belongings from his office. Several employees quietly watched from their desks as he exited the building. There was no applause, no celebration, only reflection. Many wondered how different the outcome might have been if he had taken 30 seconds to treat one stranger with basic respect. Samuel Brooks declined the CEO position for himself. Instead, he appointed an experienced leader known for putting employees first while reminding the board that profitability and compassion should never compete with one another. Under the new leadership, Blackwood Technologies introduced mentorship programs, expanded employee wellness initiatives, strengthened community partnerships, and encouraged executives to spend time working alongside frontline staff. The changes weren't immediate, but over the following months the culture slowly transformed. Employee satisfaction improved. Innovation increased. Turnover declined. Investors remained confident because they recognized that businesses built on trust often outlast those built solely on fear. As for Samuel, he quietly returned to the life he preferred. Some mornings he could still be found sitting on the same park bench feeding birds, carrying the same old leather notebook. Most people walked past him without recognizing the billionaire investor who had changed an entire company with one lesson. He never seemed to mind. In fact, that was exactly the point. Samuel had long understood that the world's greatest mistake is believing someone's value can be measured by the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the balance in their bank account. Character reveals itself in the moments when we believe there is nothing to gain. So before you judge the next stranger you meet, remember Ethan Blackwood's story. The person standing in front of you may never change your financial future, but the way you choose to treat them will always reveal something about your own character. Respect costs nothing, yet it has the power to open doors that money never can. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments what lesson stood out to you the most. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly because of their appearance? We'd love to read your experience. If you enjoyed this documentary-style story, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.